Welcome back. I'm supposed to make one official announcement for the Student Advisory Board for the design charrette that they are organizing, and that message is, you can go stag. I'm not sure what that means, but what it means is that you can sign up solo and they will match you in their infinite wisdom of matchmaking, so you can form the competition team. So please sign up. You don't need friends or other people to sign up. They will fix you up. So welcome back to our spring lecture series. This is now the 5th lecture in 2 weeks, so maybe you feel like you never left, in which case thank you for sticking around. It's a great pleasure, surprise, and frankly relief to be able to welcome Winy Maas to UIC. He's been on our most wanted poster for a while, and it's nice that he generously agreed to get captured this evening. One is tempted to use the tired cliche, he needs no introduction. And I think that it's true, but it's not true because he's well known, although of course he is well known. But it's true rather because whether in studio or seminar, whether by intelligent extension or unconscious osmosis, you have all in some way been doing his work for the last 3 years, or perhaps for the last 15 years. Winy has 3 master's degrees, one each in architecture, landscape architecture, and urban design and planning, which is not surprising given how seamlessly these 3 areas are reconfigured in the work. He was a project designer at OMA from 1990 to 1993, where his influence and signature is unmistakable in a number of the key projects that came out of that office in that important phase of the office's work. In 1991, along with Jacob de Vries and Jacob van Ries and Natalie de Vries, they're not so progressive there that the men actually do take the last names of the partners. Winy co-founded MVRDV in Rotterdam. By 1997, they had completed a trio of early and by now canonic projects: the Villa Vipro in Hilversum, the Vozoko housing in Amsterdam, and the Double House in Utrecht. At the same time as these design projects, the office was also engaged in parallel research that resulted in publications that you all know, from Pharmax in 1998 and Metis City Datatown in 1999. And in this continual complicity of striking design experimentation, along with simultaneous research that has marked almost 2 decades of the firm's research, it's really become the model for contemporary offices around the world. That was a long run to the restaurant we made. I'm out of breath somehow. Sound check we were doing earlier. As an extension of these endeavors, Winy has taught at the University of Technology in Delft, the Berlage Institute, the AA, Yale, MIT, OSU, and in 2006 was the recipient of the Marcus Prize at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Among his many other awards and honors, Winy was also just named the official city architect of the new town of Almere in the Netherlands. So I guess this allows him to have his revenge on his previous employer, which is probably nice. Perhaps more than a style of design, Winy is responsible for introducing to architecture a style of thinking through design. From Pharmax to 2006's KM3, one aspect of that signature design thinking is that the sheer accumulation of quantities can, under certain circumstances, engender an entirely new or other world of qualities. As a combination of unlikely genres or roles for the architect, it combines the dry practices of the accountant with a visionary, maybe even crazed, speculation of a contemporary version of Bucky Fuller, global if not galactic in its ambitions. We were talking in studio the other day about Bond movies, and if one had to characterize Winy's work by a Bond movie title, it would be "The World Is Not Enough." Or maybe as a kind of counter-ecology, 4.5 Earths are not enough. Little insustainability joke we have. One of the most seductive aspects of Winy's work and MVRDV's work is the moment where seemingly banal and totally plausible facts erupt into totally unexpected or unpredictable configurations. And it's this capacity to inject surprise into the world through design that is one of the key elements for a variety of projects taking place in the school, and really for which we are all indebted to Winy's instigation. If one had to be even more reductive in suggesting Winy's singular contribution, it would be that he almost single-handedly introduced the question mark into architecture. And it's probably related to the fact that he is now the director and founder of what he calls the Y Factory at the Delft University. In other words, I think one could trace a history of the modes of architectural argumentation or manifesto that goes from the exclamation point to the period to the question mark. From Korb's imperative, "We need a new architecture," to Rem's, Koolhaas's flatly banal and matter of fact, "We need a new architecture," to Winy's, "We need a new architecture?" It's this design thinking that displays the character of a thought experiment, and that is a mode that many of us inhabit today. For a few years now, I've been trying to figure out what would a design practice look like, or even a model of education pedagogy that articulates design project as a form of counterintuition, as a kind of jujitsu on current platitudes and commonplaces. And I have to admit that my secret source for all of that has no doubt been Winy all along. Perhaps the one counterintuitive secret to reveal and expose at the front end, though, is that behind all of the Trojan horses of research and programming, the fact of the matter is Winy is one of the most talented designers of his generation, and we shouldn't let all of the compelling data that he will show us disguise that fact. So please join me in welcoming the always questionable Winy Maas.
Does this work? Can you hear me? Or is it okay? It's on. Okay, this vending machine off, or is this a normal environment? Okay, then I'll speak louder today than in any place I've been speaking the last times. What I want to do today, I want to talk about what's next, and maybe it's dedicated coincidentally to what Bob was doing in this place, but it's the core question, I think, of architecture these days. And any book I make, any building I do, always the first question that I get from Bob and others is, and what's the next step in that way? We are always eager to see what's before us. And I think that's a good question. It's fine. I start to live with it. I start to accept that question. I start to think we should take that more serious. So I want to dedicate tonight's lecture to that. So how to do that? And as Bob said already before, we made some sequence of volumes. And this pile is in a way an answer to the what next issue. It in a way starts to formulate in say, my or our manner how we can deal with that revealing sequence of unknownness. So maybe that's what I wanted to refer to. What did we do after, in this case, one book, and how can you go from a moment when you've given yourself completely, because every book you give yourself, and any PhD student knows that, and is empty afterwards. So what can you do afterwards? I consider it as a spiral of hopefully accumulating knowledge. I see it as a kind of series of progressive scenarios for the moment, and I want to construct curiosity. I hate the fact that in times of crisis, like these years, that so many people are actually the least curious than ever. Every crisis gives immediately the kind of mood that we should go back in architecture to the 70s, the 60s, the 50s, and 40s, and to copy what you've done. Based on fear, developers don't want, say, innovation, therefore. And it becomes like a kind of hideaway of the crisis to make things that you already know. This kills architecture, this kills anybody. It's not only about architecture, it's about the human existence to go beyond that kind of fear. So that's why I love this question. That's why it's you should focus about it. And of course we can make an agenda, and recently Julian made this unreadable agenda and my agenda on top of this week, last week, adding, and I think it's a method in a way to describe what you want to do. I love agendas. I love the fact that you write things, that you scribble them down, that you want to do extra elements, and that you, and in between is a kind of growing say construction of the new epoch in your life, a new epoch in your work. Normally what you do with what's next is that you, and here the data come in, is that you work with trends. And there's a trend in architecture. Blobbing is over these days. So that means that we can look at that. And on that base, one can work, and I think that's for you all in this audience, I think, anyway, a method to consider how to deal with the trends. You can analyze them, you can enlarge them, simply. You can point at the limits. Trend breaks are the hottest things in scenario thinking that you can imagine. And there are trend evolutions that work on a kind of evolutionary sequence. And there are inventions. And yes, there is as well trendlessness in the end. One of the most important elements, I think, of these days is that we have to deal with an enormous, say, competition, and we have to deal with the fact that whatever you do, it is copied or used or whatever word. And how can we use that, say, that phase? How can we, in a way, look positively to that process? This opening last week, it was interesting to see this kind of this decorative stack of houses, very beautifully done, up to the level of vanity, I almost would say, and that looks to what we are now constructing in the same moment in Taipei. But there is a difference, and I'll explain that later. So in a way, we are close. We become closer and closer after the blob epoch, and due to the, say, the diagramming, and due to the fact that we are talking more about reasoning than ever before, is that that architects become simply closer. And it has as well to do that we have not so much material. We have stones, bricks, some new stuff, and that's it. But we have to discuss seemingly what we want to do with that. Another one, a building that we make currently in Norway, in Oslo, and it seems as part of a kind of pixel power movement that's going on now over the planet. And another building of OMA that they just won in Rotterdam. Who was first? I don't care. Or this stack of a building we make next to Montparnasse in Paris. And oh, what a surprise of what's in Asia happening. Or this tower that we are making in Milano. And hey, again, we are following someone which is next door in a way. Or what to think about this? Penelope worked in a way on it a while ago. And now that's happily constructed now in Lausanne. So, is this bad or is not? Or this one, our Shenzhen tower, and a Danish version. And I was like surprised to see this week in the press Bjarne's picture with Pharmax on the back. So that helps a little bit to understand our processes. And you can take the same picture from me. I'm the last to with the VPRO in my mind to consider that. But what's the issue is how can we improve things with all these things? How can we use the knowledge that has been made, and how can we to make that better? How can we, say, beat those things that have become before? And we did that with Le Corbusier in the past a lot. A complete generation was pointing at Le Corbusier and tried to improve it. So why, and the same with Nice, and you have these examples here in your city, how ultimately Rem tried to kill his godfather in that way. And that's good. I think that's how we should operate, and be set straight as possible, and and even more in these days. So what can I add to that copy-paste story? What can I add to this kind of sequence of, say, hopefully innovation that is coming out of that? And say that more or less collectiveness, this new Sion that we actually is under construction in a way. is I would like to point at the widest agenda, and as Bob already said. And I was wondering recently to the latest production of architecture, so I went through all the volumes of wallpaper and scanned in and examined what they published. And this is sort of the secret of it. And then I analyzed how big these buildings are. So maximally they're 1,500 square meter, the wallpaper publications. Architecture seems to be small these days. On the other hand, if I look to other colleagues that are building this kind of stuff, and which has a minimum size of 150,000 square meter, they are the least publicized in all the magazines that we checked of the last 5 years. I find this a horrifying and beautiful and shocking, say, contradiction, where the avant-garde is basically concentrated on smallness. There's a world under construction which is much bigger. Seemingly we don't get those commissions. The people are too afraid to give it to us, to want to be experimental. So for those who want to be commercial in the future, there's a huge future for you. That can be done. You can still choose when you're being trained here what to do with it. But it worries me in a way that at the same moment, what I see in the generation as well, that there's a kind of frustration going on of how to deal with that. Visions are taboo these days in architecture. You can't talk about it because we think that visions have led to horrible products, and basically in the press everyone is killed that has a vision. So we think only in small things. We become more Swiss than the Swiss itself. We want only to make happy bricks, and we'll call them the happy brick generation, that makes one smiley thing, and that's it. But what is the content of that? What are they doing? I am aware, when we make millions of happy bricks, maybe we get a very funny society. On the other hand, one could start to develop a certain criticism on these happy bricks in that way. So about scale, that was what KM3 was about. It was indeed thinking about this, endless tapestries of happy bricks, well, Mexico, or other happy bricks in Tokyo, giant landscapes of this kind of mediocrity. And the Dutch were proud of their planning, and so they made higher quality, but actually it starts to look a little bit like Tokyo or Mexico in a certain manner. And so I wanted to work at that moment with this what next issue on hypothesis, the what ifs. And a lot of people have been discussing it, is that good or is bad? But just for a minute, I took it for serious. I was talking about the space gap, but that we want more space than we actually have on this planet. I analyzed it in this manner that we have to rule it with certain instruments. This is 10 years ago. So, okay, an ecological footprint could measure it, and we could solve it, and yes, here it is. This, if we would behave like Americans all over the planet, then we could construct something. That was still my favorite slide of Manuel de Rivero, one of the students in the Berlage Institute at that moment. And we started to speculate. Yes, it's what ifs. And some people said, with all this data, we were not idealistic. Come on, man, let's add some idealistic data to it. So you can do it. For instance, in the moment that you say you have this ball, this globe, and for one moment I want to keep the world completely without borders. And impossible to discuss that in Europe, but let's for a minute consider it. And then you seek, and that's what is actually currently is happening. This is 10 years ago, and now you can see with the opening of India and the Far East and with Brazil, with a growing middle class of the planet, happily, I would say, that at that moment this kind of equation of income is growing. We're not there, that's clear, but it's there. So we did kind of small. What if these borders are open and they find this new equilibrium, then people would go where they could earn money, so for instance to the US or to China, and Sierra Leone would be empty. And I would love to show this diagram. The planet would change on that note, and it would give say, the Dutch in Europe or the Singaporeans more responsibility what to do with that opening up of the borders. That would change our cities, that would change our architecture. And with glimpses of that tendency, you can see it now in neutral buildings that are more coming up all over the planet, in structures that are dominated by, say, by neutrality, therefore, and can expect different kind of, say, usages than ever before. Some people call it sustainable, others call it simply a flexible rack. So, what can we do with that? So I studied this kind of intensification, another what if, to calculate a city which is 1 million people and how many cubic meters do I need. Actually not so much, this is on this 2 by 2 by 2 kilometer, but revealing, that was important, that's why I want to anchor this for a minute, that most of our products are actually in the city are not about housing or offices, but actually are about agriculture, energy and forestry, to compensate our behavior and to behave autarkic. This is what we need. And at that moment, if you want to densify it and give more capacities to the planet, then integration of those elements are hyper needed. And that probably is the key of, say, of our obsession, to get as much of mixage thinkable. So these are the rice paddies in that cube. These are the forests that come into the cube. And that create, at that moment, actually a cubic city, a 1 million city, which is actually fantastically mixed. Hyperly organized and actually quite open. I was surprised by it. And we turn it into models, exhibit it on different places, and show how you could survive in it. And I show it, because I come back to it afterwards. It was a base. So one of the consequences of that study led to further studies. We were asked by, actually by the county of New Jersey to work on how the city of Manhattan, or the surrounding of Manhattan and the county could become, say, more autarkic. I like that concept, politically, to imagine that, and what they need then to grow, in this case, of urban, say, farming. That would be a fantastic tower that would be constructed. I love this one. That who dares to attack this guy in that way? And if you do it then per farm, then still they're quite okay. And this is what New Yorkers eat, and this is what they then need. We work in the Hague on that same manner. We were asked and look to what people in the Hague are consuming, and can that be then installed in the current green spaces of the Hague? And it leads at the moment to one request that we got by a farmer who lives in Friesland, in the north of the Netherlands, Annegien, a woman of 42 years old, and yeah, on that age she wants to go to the city. I can completely understand that. But she wants to take her children, say 1,000 pigs, with her. So what we design is at the moment a test building permit, because you are not allowed in our cities, which you did in Chicago in the past. We are not allowed to do that in our cities. So we make this, we put a farm. We just got a lovely farm from the north, and you can see the optimum, say, functional structure that's designed by the pig engineer to get it done. And what we only did, we make this cupola, this Boekminster filler on top of it, because you're not allowed to make pigs in the city because because of the smell and because of the ammonia. It needs a circle of, in this case, 2.5 kilometers of emptiness that surrounds it. Pigs are better off than human beings. We are forced to live in density. Pigs can't at the moment because of our protection law. That's funny. So here this is a task for universities as well, that to settle a hypothesis, and at the moment to reduce that smell circle from 5 kilometers diameter into actually only, what is the meter of triple glass with a certain kind of method, certain kind of cleaning aspects. That's what we should make at the moment, and turns this actually into a kind of beautiful product that I know that we just put into the building permit procedure, which comes in between the new Prada outlet on one hand, and on the right side the new university building of The Hague. Fantastic combination. The Hague want to be mixed, so don't forget the pigs. So those came directly out of that study. And then in Paris, of course, and you've read it, I guess, in some of your newspapers, is I want to use that as well to explain it now for more reasons, to see the direct influence, what happened after that cube of KM3, how that went to Paris, or to Grand Paris, as it is. It's a good design group. We have dinners together, and in a cool place. The average age is about 63, and of most of these dinosaurs. And so Jamel is the youngest. I'm the second youngest on this table, and almost no women, only 3 women. It's amazing how the French reign their country and how different that is from Denmark or from Norway. Anyway, it's good that the president wants to be an architect himself, and we need this kind of characters in a way to go through certain kind of compositions and to suggest or to test if urbanism can be, say, reimagined after that some of our colleagues have declared it as a dead element. And so what we try to do is for our client to give him ideas how he could work with that, how he could reign with that. He had no clue. Sarkozy didn't go to your school, and he sent his son, you have read that as well, when he wanted to become, say, the director of La Défense, to a school to teach in short time and to use in short time architecture, the speed course he got. That was that's the only reference that he has. And so what we try to say, okay, what is it? So France is more than Holland, is a culture about words. I mean, talk is like endless, and which is impossible for me. So let me try. So the basic, every word has a meaning in that way. La transparence, and everyone is immediately aware that we are talking about Jean Nouvel. So what is Paris? Paris is actually a beautiful word. It needs a challenge. So Paris is 2 challenges, is a big challenge. And in a time of post-Kyoto or post-Copenhagen, where everything is about reductionism, I think we need to challenge ourselves more. And I want to do that ultimately in a very mignon, in a small manner. Paris plus petit. Well, you know, at Paris, all of you have seen these images of went on Beaubourg and went over the roofs, and beautiful. Nothing against that. My heart always beats when I see these images. But this is only 10%, what? 8% of Grand Paris. This is what this looks like, these movies that I was showing about Mexico or Tokyo. This is the same kind of bullshit that, in this case, 14 million people are inhabiting it. I try to drive through this matter. This looks like Chicago, but it's actually Paris, but it could be any place. You just drive and you become despaired but especially in France with all the roundabouts. It took me hours to go from Versailles to via Orly to Neuilly, places that you don't know, but that's what we have to design. That's actually the task. This gap between banlieue and city, it's so obvious that everyone is talking about it, that's actually there. But it's bigger, and then there it needs to be quantified. I love Paris, and that's what I think is very important of institutions like this, and I know that you are, that's what I expect, and I'm going to talk later in the dinner with Bob about it, if the Chicago project is really under development in your place, because you need to establish a culture of urbanism. Anyway, we need to have thinkers and doers that do that. Paris has that a little bit. For instance, I think that the Notre is fantastic. He was thinking with his axis, the Champs-Élysées and the Tuileries, of an escape of Paris already. Infinity was an important thing, and I think that's the core part of the talk tonight, when we talk about what next. It's about infinity ultimately. And so he did a good job. Haussmann was not that bad. He raised, with his act of Infinity Boulevard, he turned it ultimately in a kind of tripling of the program of the center of Paris. He made it possible to raise the ground prices with with about 1,000% in almost like 20 years. So he was an amazing constructor as such. So we can learn from him. Another good guy who made something about infinity. Or the Ville Nouvelle, maybe they're not so good, the new towns, but on the other hand, they're invented there. And I wish that some cities would have done it in this way, like La Défense, to keep the old city as it is. The RR and the TGV are from them, and they're brilliant in their transport system. And Le Corbusier, of course, was the home architect, and he did, but hey, this is not built. And another beauty, not built. Or this one from Paul Memon. Yes, it's now built in Santiago de Chile, under the river, anyway, but Paris didn't build it. So we have thinkers, and we have makers, and both should be there. But when I saw all this idea, I asked to Sarkozy, you are facing as well, with your project, enormous amount of skepticism. A skepticism not only in your country, but as well with the critics. Any article in the New York Times will be in the future about this new Napoleontonism, which you are dealing with. So that can lead to blockage, and especially in times of crisis. And I spoke already about it. Blocking is everywhere in that way. So how can we deal with that? There's another good word, the word grand. Grand is not about scale, not SML Excel or something like that. No, it's about quality as such, and it's about let's say an ambition to deal with, let's say, and hopefully a higher state of civilization, and that's what maybe the operation is about. But in the same time, we are confronted with Paris, which is in another way great. It's a super ocean of 856 mayors that reign this place. This looks like the Balkan, or it looks like the Netherlands, or it looks like our contemporary welfare society that's dominated by communities. And a lot of people are studying communities these days. I think it's one of the topics, I guess, for your faculty as well, what to deal with it. And we idealize it, because that's the place, this mini scale, where you can still be human. And so this is the issue. Can, out of communities, out of individualism, still grow a larger scale? Can we fantasize about it, how to deal with that? And I'm already happy that in this half year, a new kind of Conseil de Maire is already established, a kind of board of mayors that try to work with it. So what do they want? They want something that is post-Kyoto, sustainable, for this lovely word that you're dealing with in this school. So, but what is principally the role of cities these days? That's what it's actually questioning. What's the role of a metropolis? In this case, between 12 and 14 million people, 15 maybe. And there's still a sign. This is what we used. I used that, made us for KM3, and I told it again. Cities have a role, so that to keep certain spaces empty, to make possible synthesis thinkable, to lead to concentration where you can meet, and where you therefore can be surprised by these meetings, and and maybe ultimately it's the place where democracy is possible because of that density, because of the fact that you have to live with each other. So is this maybe the last attempt, Grand Paris, to make a dense place on the planet? And I told you already that it's that after Kyoto it was dominated by reduction. Don't make big windows because they cost energy. Don't waste money on flimsy details, because everything is about reductionism. And you can see that in the architecture, and I will point it out later. And actually what we try to do, to escape from that, we have to say we want to have plus. We have to be plus ambitieux, plus responsable, more stable, more efficace, more open, more cohesive, more attractive. If Paris wants to be exemplary, if it wants to be grand, then it should be more in that way. And how to do that? So we said we can calculate that for you. And that's our specialism since the last 15 years. So we are working on a city calculator, which Bloomberg wants to have as well. That's nice to hear. because every mayor says that I have the greenest city on the planet. I don't believe you, I tell you. And so let's try that too. Yeah, but I have more BREEAM buildings or more LEED buildings than any other city. And here this mayor of Chicago that's already saying. So what? LEED and BREEAM is not about ecology. It's only about one entity. But they forget in those two stupid rules about the whole relationship with mobility. Or there's no point system that guarantees anything about, say, the larger scale effects on it. So maybe the city calculator will do that. And this is the model for that. I'm not going into it, but you can believe me that it can be a fantastic tool to think about the performance of the city. So in my first presentation, I said, Monsieur le Président, votre ville, Paris, is fantastic, so visited. But Grand Paris, okay, they go to Versailles and Disneyland, but that's it. And if I look to Paris, how fantastic your density of employment is, then Grand Paris is suddenly one of the lower places in Europe. It was stunning to see that. And the ecological footprint, actually of the center of Paris, is as horrible as the of Grand Paris. Or what do you think? That's partly because of actually the low public transport at Paris. Yeah, they made it, but actually it's not that high. And they drive like actually more than people almost in Los Angeles, the people in Grand Paris. They love their cars to go through it. That's a reality. But I have to say, this is the place where the most amount of electric cars are already there. So I'm not against it. Maybe you can create a city that's only driven by electricity in that way, etc. So at that moment, with this kind of graphs, with this kind of positioning, we have an idea what the score is of Grand Paris. Here and there it's quite good, but when you compare it with different cities, well, in certain cases it's really bad in Grand Paris. And I think this that's why the calculation really helped to convince, say that in this case the state, to make a program. Okay, what do I want to do? I want to do it in 4 years. I want to have already some results. Good. How much? 10% of the optimum? 15%? And you always ask a little bit more, that you know that do that as well, so in this case as well. So we said, okay, let's imagine 2030. Paris is hyper good, responsable. What does it need? It needs then, and now it becomes architecture. Now you see suddenly how much you need in terms of water and in terms of forests to compensate, or how much energy sources you need, or how much different ways of transport, how much other kind of housing to have that middle class in these places, or to have this economical program. This is my gift to the president. Just a box, just a cubic city, and then, okay, then we can unpack it. Then we can say, okay, now we can work with that. Then you have a tool in that 30 years, 20 years to say, what do you want? The Los Angeles typology? Or only building at the poor areas of Paris? Ooh, not bad, why not? And to invest in that, use everything you have to do what you want to achieve, or to turn everything into kind of house mall, if that's a kind of good product as such. Or make KM3 literally at that moment. But it was a bit too big, and so that I didn't get this present of the president. Main question, of course, because Paris has no brownfields like your cities. So where can you put it? Is there capacity? What is mutable? What is changeable? And so we did a kind of endless excursion on what things are changeable, what you could build and where, and how much you could do it. And that leads to this kind of possible, say, in these 20 years, you could do this. That's quite big. But 40% is blocked by the laws. Here as well, but especially in France, where they block everything, height, la pure, and so everything is kind of, so that you can't do everything. So we can deblock it. And that was a direct request of, that's the nice thing of when you work directly for the state and for the president. He said, well, you give me ideas, I change the laws. And that's, now we're talking. And now it's getting fun with architecture. So this is what, and we'll see that in the show soon in L'arsenal, where we try to de-block certain zones, de-zone, make other kinds of zoning acts. I think that would be fantastic for parts of the states as well, to think what kind of creative zonings could be done in that way to make that possible. So ultimately, for that program, this box, this cubic city, I only need that to make it. I can make it mignon. I can keep it small in that way. So, of course, how to do all that? That's the issue what we're doing now. So I show you some projects, some say studies that we're now undertaking. So, for instance, for the landscape, it's clear that a new forest is under program now, and make it kind of national park that surrounds Grand Paris. Or in terms of energy, the Plateau des Saclais, the southwest part, is higher and is fantastically usable for an ultimate, say, grand monument of, say, 500-meter high windmills, a block of air, a monument constructed out of air. That would be, after the Grande Arche, would be my ultimate dream to beat, say, the former president. Or this is already now injected. Since 5 months, every building has to be covered with the solar park. That's beautiful. The whole story about Beaubourg, and you will see in the end a golden roof instead of the zinc roof, which is currently there. And for infrastructure, this is my personal obsession. I don't know if I get it, but through the group. But the funny thing is, they made high-speed trains, the TGVs, and they all end at the Gare du Nord. They all end in Gare de Lyon. And when I arrive from Rotterdam and I want to go to Lyon, I have to take an hour and a half extra to go to change trains. So what they are doing, they make insane expensively rockades, like a tangent system that surrounds that city. So stupid to do that. So what we calculate at the moment, again calculation, is what can we do if we simply connect them, these lines? Because I find it highly elitist anyway that all the trains end in Paris. So why not then connecting it and turning it into a new carrefour? And at that moment you can release pieces of the ground on top in the heart of the city to be built, the highest ground prices of Europe we're talking about. So this is what it could be. And of course, under Gare de l'Europe and Carrefour de l'Europe, under the Place de la République, is now that construction. Same with, maybe you've read that, about this new fast speed train, 35 billion euro project that goes around the periphery. How big should that thing be? 80 kilometers, as has been proposed by the minister now? Or can it be smaller? So we try to convince now to make it smaller, so that actually the basic problem is not the wider periphery, but the first circle, which is like completely wiped out through poverty. So, but that in this case would lead to, when you put it on the Boulevard Frédéric as it is now, it would turn to the biggest dig ever one can imagine. And it would connect the banlieue with the city. It would lead to building program, but immediately more active than in Boston, and it would lead to a fantastic, double boulevard. We're working on metro system. They're already in the first 7 years. There's money to make about 10, 11 new metro stations. So how to do that? Extending lines. Let's start with a grid. Equality, égalité was always important. I remember. So if you start from there, then you find your lines. So the reversed hypothesis is used in traffic terms in order to imagine a structure of a city. Because that's what's happening these days. We only make linear cities more and more, and which avoids compacticity. And so we have to reverse the process, etc. So house wants to be solidaire, so we add one layer of program on the roofs while the constructed can be very beautiful, blue of course. We use the schools, every school, because they're horrible, the schools in France. You have seen the movies, I guess. So you have to renovate the schools. Every public program, you give it to a developer, he has to do it, and he has to build, and you can compensate it with 100 or 200 houses. Whoops, then you get this kind of possible reprogram. Beautiful. The parks in a way as well. Who dares to go into the Bois de Boulogne or into the Bois de Vincennes? used 10 fantastic landscape architects to make the kind of renovations of the park and make the edges stronger so that they can be used. Of course, for the Seine, that's so cute, so mignon, that deserves already more space because of the floods, and that's under development now. This kind of widening act that means that certain cellars have to be changed. That means that certain buildings should be redone, but it gives a kind of, it opens the city at the moment. It makes Pont and Mont maybe in the future thinkable. And last but not least, of course, this City 68 Act that our former generation did by splintering the universities in Paris and putting them everywhere. If I go and study architecture in Paris, dans le 8 ou dans le 10e, I don't know. I have no clue where the universities are. Sorbonne was good, but it lost its potential therefore. So, and that's happening now. There will be, in the beginning I said maybe we should do everything on the Sorbonne in that way, but that we didn't manage, so there will be 3 universities in the future instead of 20 as they are now. To enhance and force a little bit more the collaboration, to get more efficiency and to get more productivity out of that. And next time I'm not allowed to show yet, that is our design for Descartes, one of those things, and Xavier is working on Saclay. So to see what kind of how these new campuses should look like and how they could be made. And then, what did we do with all this project? I made too much with all this project. They're beautiful, but we could shrink it. This is what we need. Only 30 years. Yes, it is compact. With this project that we could do. And what we did then we made a city that beat the rest of Europe in all its manners. And that I think is the minimum what Sarkozy should do in that way. Short break. So I think it from I used this project a bit extensively, or maybe too extensively, but I thought it was good to span the gap of formulating an agenda towards projects in order to go from one scale to the other. Okay, chapter 2 of my afterthoughts. How can it then bring to architecture in that way? It doesn't do what I want. In KM3 I said that architecture was kind of a tool. So even when I make something I try to consider a little bit about, say, its responsibility or its suggestion or what it can do on a larger perspective. I pleaded for kind of urbanistic architecture. And that is then, in conceptual architecture, then it's easier to do that. To span that gap between the small and the large scale. And we did it in that book with looking to buildings as a kind of experiments on that larger scale. And we gave it words. Buildings become actors. They can do some things. So they are all verbs, and I give you some of the verbs. For instance, buildings can behave as grounding for the next generation to imagine the density. And I think afterwards we made this village this was not ready in KM3, but we made it. And we calculated how much, say, infrastructure we need, and how much steel, and how much, say, étanchéité, and how much trees we need in order to make that village on top of this building. So here it's coming. You had to find money in order to make it as cheap as possible, because it was expensive to do that. And my target was to calculate if I could make this extension for the same price that I would do it on ground level when I have to buy ground. That's the target to reach. So there it is, and here is the infrastructure. We go to the houses. One of the family members can go to his brother and go further away, shower. And ultimately, we made this village with only non-material. Because gutters were too expensive. because any detail was horrible to make. And you can see that in Rem's building here, millions of details, man, I recall. I'm happy that this building was not about that. And ultimately it leads to a kind of heaven, slightly up. And we painted it on purpose blue, because we love Calvin Klein, but we love as well this step towards God. And we think as well that by doing it, at that moment, you can see it from a distance. And suddenly it's there. And it wants to say, I am there. It doesn't want to hide, it wants to claim that even with 40 square meters, I can contribute to an agenda, in this case, of densifying Rotterdam and turning it into a new, say, kind of Trojan layer over that city. That, and it has become now, this is the marking point for the local air traffic. This, in a way, is funny to see that. But architecture can work on larger scale, as I want to say with that, and can try to work on content that deals with that agenda. Of course, you think, do we stop then? No, it has become a program in Rotterdam. More houses are constructed, not by us, but by a range of architects to make that now possible, even in monumental circumstances. And we got a commission to see what we can do as well with public buildings. So this is one of our museum projects. This is the Historical Museum of Rotterdam, and it's a new building. Don't think it's just Disney. It's like built in '68, but it used to be a 17th century building. They're too small, and they need an extension. So where to do that? Put it on top, next door, impossible. So what we do, we have developed a new jacking system, so that in 5 weeks time we can jack the whole building up, to put some floors in between, column by column by column. So actually the building process becomes, in this case, the most fantastic element next year. We add some stairs and another one, and wow, now the building is on a podium. It's more monumental than it was before, and it gets, say, a position. Next technique, we can open our building. So, and this is, as we spoken about before, we opened this block, we flipped the block, and we turned the patio, and we gave it therefore to a meaning, to a further distance. It became, for this building, when you walk through the building from neighborhood to neighborhood, you meet some people, go to the streets, and ultimately you end up on this soccer field that's floating over the city. It's a kind of relief after all these blocks in Madrid to end up with a moment that you can have a view, a mirador over the city, an escape. And it absorbs at that moment collective life, we hope, and more than only housing at that moment. It became the symbol of that I'm quite proud of, in a way that icons don't have to be only museums or theaters. It's horrendous that we only think in that matter, and that leads at the moment to kind of almost it's impossible to think about icons. The press says only icons are terrible, they cost money, and which is not true. They can be exemplary, and we have to make exemplary things in order to escape from the common brutalities and realities. So I think this was this is a kind of monument in a way, an icon on one of the most important aspects of a civilized culture, that's self-criticism. I mean, I can't do this in Denmark or Norway, which is reigned by xenophobia. But in Spain, where a foreign architect could say, I don't want to make a block, you give me a block, but I want to turn it to flip it and turn it into a tower because you made too many blocks. That if a culture allows for that, then I think then it's touching certain a mode that I become almost sentimental about. And so it became a background for this kind of activities, because it was certain, I don't know, there was a plaza, and you could, and not only a block. Then the mayor said, okay, it's a success, after game 3 I'll give you a new commission, you make, now you have to make a block, and now no tower. Okay, so this is next door, to the Mirador, and I hated blocks, so what can we do? And then I think, I love Corbusier, but he forgot one thing. He didn't build it. So let's do what he didn't do, and it was pretty. successful, I would say, in his production, but one thing he didn't do. So let's make this, and let's open the block, and that means the biggest, slightly higher, and let's do that for social housing in that way. So here you see it simply blocks, it's just like Lego, with prefab concrete. You put it on top of each other, and hop, ready. And everyone has then a garden. So it becomes an open block with a wind that goes through, and it's needed when it's 40 degrees over there. And to a patio, which is not only for a couple of people, but for a group of people. So that has simply been built, as Spanish people do. So you can sit, you can, from your balcony, you can look through the others, your garden, and from your house, you can look through so the perforation goes further than your toilet in that way, and leads to this kind of perspectives. And this kind of, say, from the heart of the building towards the extension. And this is what I'm talking about. This reminds me of some drawings. This is what, is this copy-paste? Is this, or is this like working it out? Is this making it adaptable for social housing, for low cost in that way? And giving it, say, a reason, even an ecological reason in this environment. In Berlin, we are working on another opening act. That's this monster is developed for the Hitlerjugend in 29. Was it? It's on the Kurfürstendamm, and it's like, ooh, my God. So our client wants to have a shopping center in it for, yes, Prada. Friedrichstrasse doesn't work, so he has to do another thing. He wants to make the Kudamm better. And he wants to have shops not only in the front, but in the end as well. And this is the front, and this is the inside, and this is the Lichtenburger Straße on the other side. So, what to do? So we looked at it carefully, and we said, okay, we give a new street. So we do like a surgeon, we cut little pieces out of the Hitlerjugend and to open it a little bit, and we add to the collection that Berlin has. One beautiful, I love the Reichstag, because it's a way of thinking about history, and we add just another interpretation. It's organized by the parking garage, this sheet that cuts the size. This is the garage, and from there we start to design this new street on top of each other, and in which you can notate any piece of history. So this is, here all the history will be shown. One piece of glass, that's it, and shows any kind of, because it's built out of steel with plaster in it. There's nothing is stone in the 30s and in the 20s. So and it reveals that act. And here you can see some pieces on this new Cumberlandstraße that opens and extends the Kudamm. An opening act, trying to absorb public life in our buildings so that it becomes not too introvert. We can use another verb. We can span to absorb programming. Housing program, and you can see it here, for instance, in this building, we normally use more concrete than we need because of acoustical reasons. And and especially in housing. So we try to do that now with the market hall in Rotterdam, on this place. It's now under construction, where the client wanted to have this. So it's simply two slabs of houses and then something like miralles between, so like a hall with some fancy tiles. And that doesn't work in Rotterdam, where everything is more like about boldness and about so maybe this is better, and to advocate the food sector of Rotterdam, and to say, okay, here you can get the best food. I want to yell about it, but the client said, no, too many penthouses, then they have no view. Okay, we make a view. But this is too expensive structurally. Okay, we make a cheap structure like the Roman Zoo. Or, no, but then there's no lift in it. Okay, we do a lift and that's it. And then we use Dutch concrete structure. There's tunnels where you pour of steel, where you pour concrete on top of it. And the issue is with these tunnels, you can just push them a little bit. On the lowest floor, 20 centimeters, because the structure is not that good. Then 1 story higher, it becomes a meter. And 1 story higher, it becomes 2 meters, 3 meters, 4 meters, and up they kiss each other at that moment. And again, the building process is actually the architecture becoming here, when these kind of kissing acts will lead to this tunnel of food. And so it will be simply a pure rack, outside only flowers of the people, and inside, because that's what we're talking about, there we spend the money. We do one LED screen that's now tested in Shanghai, and we do a piece of that, and you can open. I love the moment that in all the kitchens you can open the window, you can open the screen, and in between the Coca-Cola or in between the other advertisements or fish at the stable 20 costs €3, you're part of it. You can shout at yourself, get the fish out, man, and bring it out. So pop is what it's entering here. It's not populistic, but it's on the edge of what can it be? How can you deal with such kind of houses that it becomes part of it without becoming a cliché, or become the cliché of Porto, or the cliché of Italian societies? No, in a way, maybe this is a contemporary translation of that, and wants to, because I think the screen in this case will be marvelous from the interior as well. We try to do that as well in Tirana. Tirana. That's Albania, and that's our poorest country in Europe. But with a hyper-energetic culture. Of course, there's a lot of chaos. There were fires, riots everywhere. It was anarchism since the communists left this place. And every moment that I'm going there, I still have this kind of police escort that helps me to maneuver through the city. And it has to do with the fact that Edi Rama, the mayor of Tirana, who wants to become a president, and you've read it last week, they're summoned by the UN because of malversations in the elections to collaborate again. And so it's an interesting moment. What can an architect do in that place? Different than in Paris. You know, why do I want that to go there? Is this only because of exoticism in that way? Is this my way of saying this is my holiday in a way? What can Edi did already, and you know him because of the article I think in the New York Times, which you should reread. He wants to be an architect as well. He was a pop musician, a rapper, but he and a painter. So he made this. He painted some of the social housing. He cleaned some of the mess in the first act when he became mayor and minister of culture. He made gutters for the city. He turned it sometimes into plazas. This is a Barcelona effect that is much more interesting in a way than Barcelona almost itself. So this is our first building in Tirana. We are given as well this building to paint, and I love this sexy flag. That is try to turn it almost into something which expresses the beauty of that situation ultimately. Or the next commission that we have here, we have actually a range of commissions in this place. This needs to be the place for the new market hall. We won this competition with for the shopping center, where we used actually the offices and the housing to surround this passage with this, and yeah, it looks beautiful, a bit Zaha, but that's okay. And but it was a manipulation of program, combined it with a hill on top and a passage below. And then after winning it, the contractor came to us and the developer and said, we can't build this. This is impossible to do. We need B80 for this to make this skin. You can see that in Wolfsburg or in other places. You need minimum B80. We only have B25 concrete, which is a lot of pebbles inside, you know, and you cannot. And so, what can we do? So, what to do then? Are you then saying, no, I'm an architect, I keep it like this, and you have to build it, or I never build it, or then this is not over Arab that came. It was a local engineer at that moment, and he said, what I can give you for B25 is an overhang about this. Okay. Per floor? Yes, per floor. So that's what we did. We changed it, and simply per floor, that's what you see here, and that leads to this kind of hills, stairs that bring you up, and this kind of interiors at that moment. And actually, wow, they were not bad at all. B25 is not as bad as you think. It helps to manifest simply what you can do in that places. We clad it with second-hand mirrors from all the stolen cars that, and that will be, I think this is architecture on a place. It contributes to that scale. It contributes to the mixage that I was pleading for. It's part of that agenda, and it's part of the technique of spanning. In Guangzhou is similar project, much richer. Seoul, Korea, at the moment, interesting economic situation in the global crisis. And what they do is they build tremendously all the valleys. They fill the valleys with program, and the valleys become horrible because you cannot breathe anymore. It's no ventilation, nothing. And they build it basically with shopping centers. Mixed use program. Okay, mixed use program is okay in KM3. I pleaded for it, so who can be against? But this is the concept. And so you make towers, a load of towers, you build a plinth, and you add some water for decoration. So, this is one, this is SOM, towers, made another spot, plinth and some water. This is Jerry, another spot, towers, plinth and water. Towers, plinth and water. Jean-Nouvel, another place, towers, plinth and water. So if Jan Bottle even was on it, so he's, how can you do this, man? This is, so what I was just given is that spot over there, in between two hills. Oops. How can we lose our innocence on that spot? I hated the valleys. So, but actually, I want to do this. And basically, I think the culture of Southeast Asia is all about this. There's a tremendous last 5 years, and Yumo Chang was part of it. He was like discussing how Chinese should be built, or how East Asian should be built. No foreigners, please. No bird nests anymore. Let's do what is now, and happily I must say, Bob, the sustainability discussion in East Asia helps again to open up the case. That case, because then the agenda of the greenness is the same over there than it's here, so they can use each other's knowledge. But anyway, this is the painting that I want to do. What can we do? Actually, what we should do is to make it literally. Can we do that? And can we do that with a technique that these developers know and understand? This is the program. Okay. So we just bump it up a little bit. Here, bang, 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 and you get grottos underneath. You can walk from grotto to grotto, from destination to destination. I start to talk like a commercial engineer almost. And this is how the section I look. And how it becomes, and every grotto can be fantastic. Can be, just keep, there are they. And they follow, the only thing, so we did, and we worked with Jerry in this case, and he's good at in his blobs. You know, you get always circles. And he sort of says, this is our streamlined diagrams, but, and then you can maneuver with the circles. That's the nice thing. Okay, you do. This is this composition. Look, this looks actually okay. This little bit 70s hallucinistic. Okay, but we gave, this is what we added. Of course, a catalog in our best tradition. What can we do? We can do this for housing. We can do this for the offices. We can do this for the hotels. We can do this for the department store. And you choose. Done. No architect further involved. But this is the plan. Not more or less of that. What happens at that moment? And on top of the parking garage, here in the shopping mall, immersions. And then if you go up and up and up and up and up and up, it's gone. It becomes peaks, it becomes hills. And we can make terraces instead of making straight buildings, which is impossible. Yeah, of course, Patrick Leblanc, he tries to paint it with plants, but it doesn't work out because they don't grow after 5 years anymore. So maybe when the terraces technique could help on that. And that's what you see here, and turn it into green buildings. And that's what the mayor now wants. Simply these boxes everywhere that turn this into this kind of vertical cityscape. And yes, wherever you are, you see green. You become sick of green, ultimately. And that, but that's the ultimate, say, green project that we hope to make in that way. This is the model as it's now recently developed, 1 to 300. So how the streets are emerging, how this, how you can look from your balconies, how sometimes you make it turn into amphitheaters, and of course how the interior grottos are looking. And I suddenly feel myself again a landscape architect. Third chapter. Sorry, it's a bit heavy fire. Don't worry, these numbers don't say anything. I go further. Other techniques. The bending act. And this is, I do especially because I'm in the US these days. And we did that already a little bit in Busan, when we on this spot used the cinemas to bend them, to give them a proper seating, and to turn it into public seating almost as a building, a sofa where you can observe the environment. We had a structure that was very flexible, using simply 70 structure to turn it into this apparatus. What happened afterwards? And that's what I want to show, because in that bending that incorporates there for public space, we did it as well in New Orleans. And after this tragic act of Katrina, and you have read so much about it. And what happened, of course, a simple repair act with a former, say, regime of your country who did that. So in a way, I find it funny that Brett was taking this initiative to do it. Initially, I thought I didn't want to go to disaster areas because it feels like these star architects that move and fly over the world like vulgars. Hey, a disaster! And construction can be imagined over there. So there was some skepticism, but in this kind of environment, with this kind of marketing feeling that was needed to raise money and to turn it into something, and I must say, Brett was not the only one. The neighbor next door was doing it with another kind of architects. They were incredibly demagogic. Now, then I definitely want to do it now. So this is the Ninth Lower Ward, one of the poorest areas, and of course horrible situation. Especially horrible because people moved away. They lost actually simply their pension with this, and especially because no one wants to live there, it was impossible again to reinvest, and an extra reason not to have pension or to have any value in itself. So this is the zone where it starts, and some of the things are now in construction. Simple urban plan based on the former ideology of the shotgun houses. And in a way I thought, this is actually, what do we do here? It's quite okay, these houses. When you have your swing on your veranda, and it's okay, it's economic, it's quite cool inside for this climate. And the colors are better than my blue houses, so what am I doing? And that's, one thing. This is our first building site. And you see the wall in the back. And the wall is 2 meters too low, as we all know. And that caused, once per 15 years, flood to come. It's stupid, of course, but it's, so the whole thing became in a way very political at the moment, and that's what I liked. Architecture should be political, can be political, and political is not that, maybe a little bit dangerous, but there are possibilities for it. Of course, there are others that don't want to, that's fine. In the whole Swiss stay on their zone. But again, in this case, I think it would be, so let's build simply the houses, let's make these shotgun houses, and let's do something with that situation. So for instance, like Tom Main is doing as well, let's put some foam underneath, and when there's a flood, it simply goes out. Beautiful house, floating house, on that. Or you see it in a row. Or the same house, or a car, and we lift it on one moment, so you can escape going out. Needs to stop because of the flooding. No, that's too bad. Actually quite an interesting house. Maybe not so easy for handicapped people, but it could create kind of terraces inside, and you could watch the best movie together down under. Good color, and you have a shade. Very close color. Then the next technique, we could lift it, with a ramp. And to use then to make a fantastic ramp. And what happens then? Oh, it becomes a sculpture. It touches a moment that, say, this manifesto becomes almost beautiful in a way. As a own mind to start from there, but it became something like that. Or this one, give it a color underneath. And a lift that this is bought by Fats Domino, and he wants to have a house the highest possible with a view over the city. It becomes a bar actually. Or the last one, this kind of bent house, so a broken house. You can escape, grandmother to the left, kids to the right, and you can meet each other in this kind of social space on the entrance space. not bad. Bending act. So this was only a strategy. But what was amazing was actually the reactions that I got. At a certain moment, Brad himself, while being in Prague on film shots, came over to Amsterdam to discuss. It's before the press release, can we do it? We touched a moment that he was criticized by some of his projects to say, should people live in a manifest? Because this is a protest against this Koeperdijk solution. And it combines, say, simply domestic shotgun house, misuse, some people say, the sensitivity of the people to turn it into, say, grotesque protest of it. Then I think, okay, now we touch a feeling, and that's what architecture can be about. I don't say it should be about, but in the perspective of today's discussion, I think yes, okay, now it becomes communicative because people can see what's happening and we're not beautifying it, but we are turning it into an apparatus. So two of them are now under construction. Both the Bent House and the Column House are there. So covering. Ooh, this is another nice technique, and we did it already far. And this is super hip these days. Everyone covers up, so mixage is there because of the green movement. We did it a while ago with this FAU building in Hilversum, where it came out of the ground basically and merged. We tried to do it in a Serpentine pavilion, where say there's lack of public space in the pavilion, and adding again a thing on the lawn was kind of boring, so let's cover the whole thing so that now the park continues and you can view Diana's monument memorial from a good point in this case. Now, you know the story, it was too expensive and we couldn't build it, so we are the only one, because next year it will stop. The tradition of the Serpentine, that's only a project. It's the shortest project, let's say. The others are 3 months, ours is only minus 2 minutes. So we tried again for the New Orleans Martin Luther King School, a similar project. Yeah, again, that school over there. And still for me a kind of beautiful picture how modernism gives a kind of feeling, like sunshine, the kind of optimism, despite everything, is in this picture for me. The school is on the right, and after a while the school becomes simply blocked because of the shooting and no windows anymore, everything's introvert. Then the flood came, and but how can you design a new school? So we asked the kids in a way to say, what would you like in a way? And this one was very sensitive to make simply a hill where you could escape in these times of emergency. So that's what we made. We proposed to use the rubble and turn it into a hill, and say to this X-ray to use the classes simply as kind of sticks that are on top of each other and that peek out of the hill. And if you peek them out, that's nice, and suddenly it's difficult to shoot like this. So that made it possible to make verandas again and to make transparent schools. And ultimately, it's a very, I think, the awareness of a public facility in your country is actually much bigger than in mine, and that isn't hearsay visualized. And it helped to avoid a discussion on architecture, because everything should be here in New Orleans should be with gables and with new urbanism like suggestion. This is simply landscape, so no one has problem with it. And this is no building in that way. That's what we need to do. Currently, we're working in that similar concept further in Montenegro. That's quite beautiful there. And it's horrendous what they're doing there. This is our site, and over there you see Sveti Stefan, the most important monument, and they want to have this on the coast. And it's, so what do you do then as an architect? Do you say, I don't want to have the commission? Or do you accept it? Can you do it better? Is a question on this moment. So these are some examples of what basically Russians and Germans are producing. Fill up this 120 kilometer zone and turn it into a new kind of Spain at that moment. And okay, after that, new qualities of life. But happily there's resistance coming up, and they want to protest it. So what can we do? What we simply do is the program of this hotel, the super hotel, is one layer if you do it everywhere. Fine. No high-rise. Only one layer. The building is cheap. And what we can do then, sometimes we need to add some program, there, or something. You see the landscape, this is what we actually do. We just lift the landscape a little bit, and push it here and there to add more program. And then make only patios that give light to the houses. This is the structure below. This is the dress that goes over it, and how, in a way, this becomes then the new coast of Montenegro in that way. Yes, you can look outside. Yes, you have your different escapes through it, and sometimes it becomes exuberant for the Russian market, so that their wishes are fulfilled, and that turns it into this kind of environment, not less and not more. In the evening, it becomes James Bond. Yes. Next technique. Yeah, we already hang things in order to double actually the public space. In this building, we did it both below and above to add some terraces. And still, this slide is important for me because it's not only about happiness. It as well shows this kind of danger. Who dares to put his kid underneath that one? And that's now say hanging house. We are designing a house for Alain de Botton, and I have a specific relationship with Alain, as you can read, of course, his books, Happiness in Architecture. And he makes a house over there, somewhere in the UK. Our first British realization. Huge, as you can see. So here, this is the spot. He bought a cute rubble of barns, and then he before I could even resist on it, he pulled them away. This was the image I got, the top from someone, and this is when I came. It was calm, same situation. So what did you do, Alan? This I'm happy what you do. And you turn it into no, you are going to make for me a new barn. Okay, you're the client. So why a barn? Because this is in a nature area, and otherwise I don't get a building permit. Okay, but I don't come from Rotterdam. What is it? 5 hours of traveling to get. What can I do? I can just send the design. But I said, no, maybe you're a philosopher. Let's think what is the best place to philosophize in the future, in that way. And so maybe building becomes already better. It starts to absorb the landscape. This becomes dangerous at that moment, because when does it fall in a way? Oh, that's a good. So this is here you have an analogy with New Orleans, a fallen barn somewhere from the Netherlands, just thrown in and thrown over this landscape, using the landscape ultimately, and you feel it in the house. In any place is in an angle. No, this is horrible. I can't live in a fallen barn. And then I cannot sell that to my readers in that way to do it. So okay, we put it there. Okay, costs a little bit more, I told her. So you're the same act, bang, how it fell, no, back. Not bad. Just hanging swing over there, and a place where everything is glass and where you float into nature. So you have a stable part and an unstable part. You see the drawings, the interior, the space, and how it's under construction, and how they're now getting there and turning it into a wobbling barn, a balancing barn, a better symbol I cannot imagine for a philosopher. Next technique, stacking. You know what we did in the expo, and what it led to kind of plea for, say, stacking different programs. In Taipei at the moment we're making a new museum. No, it's not a museum. It's a museum of tomorrow, and the client, the Jet Foundation, did already in the past with different, say, exercises, suggesting how he should develop in the future. So the last time was fantastic, 2 years ago, when this artist made this rice paddies in Taipei. Extremely beautiful. how can we beat such a beautiful, say, project that was over there? So what is then the next statement of Taipei? So what can we do after 101, this tower? What's next? The question of today's talk. And then I need to kind of observation on East Asian cities these days. And I know that there are more people are working on it. Hutongs that are disappearing. In Singapore, their last village has been killed. Communities which are under pressure, villages basically, are changed into this kind of environment, with this kind of architecture, with maybe newer expressions. Oh, a hip tower, or this is horrendous. What they produce. A sequence of blocks are entering and destroying the villages and turning it into a kind of contemporary, what is it, of it? What is this the desire of the East Asian communities? Should that continue, yes or not? Or are we facing with another kind of demand, let's say where variety could be understood as such? So what we said, okay, look at it, what the beauty. It's of course poverty, but it's like any situation in Paris with this amount of penthouses would sell at the moment. So can't we make millions of penthouses? This is the site, which is like erased and of this kind of housing. When this beautiful mall is realized and this kind of perspectives are there. So we developed with the client as a sequence of houses. It can be a cubic house, it can be a classic house with a tower, twin statue, the factory, a Catholic one, a barn of course, the courtyard, classical one where you can run around your courtyard, a cloud, the best project of one of the offices here in the US, and with different materials, different landscapes, different fences. That's what you can do. And then now we're starting to make a catalog for them of a desire that they already have for a long time, in a way, to maybe, and we selected for the moment a sequence of model houses that are constructed as a skin only, so no colors, only a web of steel in any house, and I can literally do this on top of each other, whatever I want. So that's what we do. We construct this as hopefully as a village, and as an answer to Vitra, I must say, to what, say, a future skyscraper or a future combination of individualism and density could look like. And this is accompanied with research project by the White Factory, and it will be opened in the beginning of January. I end with this, of course. Everything is about this vertical mix, and we started maybe already a long time ago. So you can see, are we now focusing and still on the same thing, yes or not? Or are we developing? Is this our niche market? And what others do on the form, do we do it in a certain kind of rhetoric in that way and try to pull it almost in a wider, enlarging perspective? Give meaning to a sequence of that every floor is different, to a meaning to kind of process where we make entrances and that we reposition at other places here like this, or we add more terraces to the south so that it becomes more ecological, etc. And that leads and we get some out of them in order to get less depth, and then you get possibilities to imagine the current program, but as well to imagine maybe more housing, because everywhere there are terraces, and therefore everywhere it can be domestic, but everywhere the office space gets as well like a smoker zone. So, and that leads to this sequence of plans. No plan is the same. And with this kind of potential infill, yes, we use structuralism, we revisited it, we copy-paste again, but we try to, by its asymmetry and by its urban notation, it leads hopefully to a kind of new interpretation, to more variety, to less repetition. Because together they form this kind of plans, or this kind of plans, or this kind of plans, where you have this mix of offices and housing going together, and this rock of flexibility in a way during the process, as long as possible, is what will show in the end its formation. Again, the building procedure itself, the planning procedure itself, becomes the manifest of that product and leads to this vertical mixage, as I hope. I end with a conclusion. And because what to do after all this, and what is there a conclusion of this what nextness as such? Yes, there is. We did in KM3 one exercise, and we were talking about the evolutionary aspect of ourselves, of architectural development. And copy-paste is about that evolutionary aspect. And in a way, we tried to make tools initially for that. The function mixer was of that, and that's what because Copenhagen is about that. Is about the fact that we could imagine that a tower is constructed with this kind of tools. You simply, this one was a test how with that program you can make a Hertzberger building so diverse as possible, and so digitize the Hertzberger, add some construction cost. What happens when there's light, when there's noise to it? You have actually a very beautiful neighborhood. Who would have designed this? In the region maker we continue that on a larger scale. And in the climatizer, we worked already on, say, on the global scale, on what's the effect of, say, this new negotiation process between cities, ultimately between the city calculator, that will come later. And that was, of course, the tool. We almost found out that the evolutionary aspect becomes interesting. Architecture is a piece, is like a petrified element for a minute, which continues afterwards. And that means that as well, that we are not going to plan in places like this anymore, but we are working later in environments which are like surrounded with information where you can interfere directly. Everyone can do that in that way. And that's what I ended that book with. But did I end the story? No. I got a commission in Shenzhen on this spot to do that. Again the same. Rhetoric became aware. Do you want this? Do you want with this society that wants to have that in that way? And this is the site in a way. And actually we said, let's make the best urban jungle thinkable. A variety where everyone can do it, especially in a country which is dictated by the planning bureau. Of course not everywhere, because we want to have this view towards, so that there is a limit to that. That's what we want to discuss with that. So that's what the process is. But the most important part of this urban plan is, say, this jungle. I'll go into that for a minute. Some of the pictures. How to deal with it, how to orchestrate it. So what we developed is an internet tool that you can bid on the ground, but with certain kind of rules. For instance, first we keep the existing, but we always surround it with an offset zone, a collective zone for infrastructure, for water, for energy sources. And that can be, don't look at the Chinese translation, but greenerize. Then you can select your plot. Always have to make the offset for access and for all its functions. And then you can do whatever you want in that plot. Build on certain kind of pricing, etc. And there you continue in the process over time to make it. So that basically means that gradually it would look like this. Or that, say, you could have this kind of simulations that throw in. With this kind of program, selecting into the patchwork, select the plot size, design your thing. I want to have a classic Chinese composition, fine. And then it goes further. So here, ultimately, not only the houses are designed, but as well the roads. Because you get then your kind of, say, composition where you don't know, oh, this is to the right. And I would love to make such a city, which is not, say, completely composed out of house money in there, but to do it in this kind of, say, method in that way. That's not. It was an upbeat for that book, of course, that we did together with MIT, and where the evolutionary became central. So from what if, I started tonight with the scenario thinking, what if we do in a certain direction? You would react to that. Yeah, that, you would say. Or you would say immediately to what, no, maybe that. So from the what ifs we go to the yes but generation. And that's in thinking. And that's what we try to model in this program, in the Space Fighter. To have all this information in it. I'm not going to detail, but here we zoom in for a minute. All the components are get that validation economically, or in this case, to keep it. They are connected with larger forces, with in this case trade patterns over the planet, And that leads to, this was, for instance, a simulation at that moment, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, on Dubai, because of certain circumstances would lead to a ghost town. I did not expect that it would become truth, so that it's funny to see it in the end. So we tried to make it, and in the Biennale in Venice, some of you might have seen it, how we use a typically MIT model of agents that look for the destination and that find their plots, and that are, and then red, these conflict zones emerge, and that lead them to a second generation of space fighter, where you can see the production of program happening, and then these agents are refining its opportunities in that way. So using the model, and more people can, at that moment, like a normal game that we all do, or internet games that we do, that can work like that, and that simulates at that moment this sequence of yes plus. Now the interesting thing, I think, for this model, for the moment, how can we bring that yes plus, this sequence of things, back to t is 0? So that at the moment of t is 0, we could imagine certain kind of patterns of interpretations. That I'm intrigued by. I have no idea about the conclusion, but that would be the next step for the next book. What's next, is my question. And I end with this slide almost. No, it's not a slide. It's an introduction to the last, say, episode of this lecture. Where indeed I opened recently the wine factory. Well, actually, I started 3 years ago, and I was asked to teach, to get a finally kind of tenure. Finally, do I want it? Do I need it? I don't know. But in this horrendous building, Delft, why Delft? And to be there, I said, now maybe I come, but I need personnel. Give me some people. And maybe I come, but then I need a good space. And the dean, this could be something for Bob as well. He said very generously, I move out. He rented some containers. Here the containers come, and Wietse came in. So this is what I got back. This, Kafka is there. And so we cleaned up, away with all the bullshit, made a good carpet, get all our friends and all our students in, and start teaching. And we were happy. This negotiation process, universities that take a year before that's happening, so that's what it went. So we were there 2 weeks, and what I saw from my window was happening over there. I went closer. Oops. That's my floor that fell down. And so I had to do my inaugural speech outside, what was planned for that week, and with a skeleton on the back. We moved to our office and to the Berlage Institute. We rented some tents for a while, and we started to imagine, it was at the beginning of the credit crisis, what we could do with the final building as such. Happily, Fortis went bankrupt in the Netherlands, so they had one building left, and we could immediately take it over for a low price, therefore, within the insurance cost. We started to imagine, so every professor gets a building in it. Let's behave like mini Yale, that you do as fast as possible, everyone gets a thing, and that can be nice. You just start to inhabit the things. So this is my place. I had to collaborate with not the nicest technician, but you cannot get over Arab always. And so he made a skeleton top. There we put it up, and we made then the floor, and we put the floor a little bit up. So put the teachers and the speaking rooms inside, but make the walls like this so that you can sit on it, and then you have an extra conference space, and that's what's happening these days. It got a prize, and then I could finally make that opening. And start to imagine what we want to do is to create a place, a factory, where we produce endless, questions, endless nexts, as I would say, and of course, with a hypothetical program, with cities of the future, future city. How can you? Because then we can exercise on an academic level on the things that I try to discuss, and we do it in 3 ways. By making model cities that are based on 1 or 2 parameters, because there are so many ideals, so many futures we could. By having, viewers, by look to specific situation, test the models on that, and in the end control them not by a library, but by a software that all these parameters brings them in. So 3 programs, a model city program, an application program, and a control program is over there. And that leads simply to a series of books. I want to produce, and I want to produce with the students simply certain kind of hypothesis that can be imagined. And so with a contract, with some sponsors, the first book has just come out, the next one comes in a couple of weeks, say 4 per year. That's what we should be doing, like a magazine almost. So this is the first, the Visionary City, because I was already telling that for future thinking, the word vision is not bad, but we have to give more knowledge to that. And everyone wants to behave like Boulez, where he could twist day and night in that way. Remarkable is to see that since 1970, there's almost no vision anymore in architectural land. All is done by our grandfathers. This is impossible to consider in that way. So we call in that book just for visionaries. Let's imagine it. Let's just do it for a minute. And we analyzed, say, series of, say, reasons why we should be visionary. So, one hypothesis to bring the subject of what next further. Imagine future visions, therefore. Another method that we try to apply is to think about crisis. Some people say that we go from crisis to crisis, and crisis is helping to get a collectiveness in times of individualism. Fine, that's fair. Well, let's make more crisis. In a way, what you guys did in Lille, that was a technique for it. Make it more complex so that there comes a crisis and there will be solutions. So, and sometimes I think as well, when we talk about traffic jams, then I think maybe add some traffic jams here and there, so then we start to improve, then we do something about it. So architecture, or maybe urbanism, is sometimes waiting a little bit longer, or doing wrong things, side effects. And actually a lot of urbanism is about that, doing things at other places than on the spot itself. It would be great to test that. That's what the crisis program is about. So here we see some of the crises. So there are more crises. There's food crisis, energy crisis, and we try to make that through the future newspapers to imagine certain kind of hypothesis on crisis. This program is sponsored by some newspapers, and that gives to kind of, okay, when there's water is damping out, when it's evaporating, I don't know what will happen then with beautiful other kind of Manhattan in a certain time. Or when the earth is, say, leaking, suddenly the Titanic is visible in that way. What happens at that moment with certain kind of, say, logics in that way. All fake, what we see of course, but or covering certain kind of researches that students are doing. Behind this, there is this kind of pieces of research, but translated in the media way that we do. I love this image. And because when the leaking is there, the North Sea between the UK and the Netherlands will not exist anymore. So finally, we will be united with the UK again, and that leads to a complete other kind of landscape of potential for the North Sea area. Then I end. Because you have a big crisis. All kind of new kind of crises that could lead to other kind of situations, other kind of cities, in order to imagine the what's next. So, I want to talk about after the crisis. That's what this Green Dream book is about. This Green Dream is a book that wants to look to the absurdity of the current situation of sustainability. It analyzes by calculation the beauty of all our LEED and BREEAM rules. It sees that for instance, the passive house, another European law, lead to this kind of windows. They are smaller than my toilet windows. That in fact we are not allowed more than 35% of glass in the near future in our homes and in our. So Mies van der Rohe is completely out in the new coding act. Thank you. And it's replaced by a covering of green that you don't see, but it's in a way quite okay for the birds, and to other kind of attributes that we get another kind of aesthetics at that moment. And it's not looking like, say, the biomimicry that has been done by Calatrava or by Zaha, in a way. That is another kind of aesthetics that is coming out of that product. And are we happy with that? What's actually happening is that from the budgets, 15 to 25% is now taken to make your water pump, to make your green grass, and to make your smaller window, in a way, or the thicker insulation. Exactly that 15 to 20% was normally used for architecture, for urban or social, also for extra stairs, or for other, that's out. Our society, if it wants to have architecture back on the agenda, needs to become richer, needs to, and that will come, I am aware. More people plead for that, and there's kind of eagerness, then the market simply grows. So the issue in that way is how to accelerate, how to make that considerable. So here again, the Green City Calculator comes in. We simply are going to what we do in Paris. We work it out now with a huge team for the European Union to make that. Let's calculate. Let's do it. And if we do it in that way, and we see it as a design tool, then I imagine that we can do fantastic new kind of cities at that moment. We can make new beauties, like in this case, Barcelona becomes self-sufficient, so racks of plants are over Gaudi, not bad. Or with our new biology, we don't need any lamps anymore in the canal houses and in the streets in Amsterdam. We can simply illuminate it by our new bacteria. Or we can imagine a landscape that surrounds Manhattan that is using the wind forests that are over there. Or we use in Phuket almost every solar aspect to lead to new export for a country that deserves an extra boost in its economy. And hopefully we can do, maybe then with this kind of avatar images, to give a kind of perspective of that green by enlarging it, by turning it in so beautiful that after that, when we have reached this green situation, we have killed the discussion. Because afterwards, we are free, we have no limitations anymore. After that, everything is greenly arranged, and that energy is free. Then again, we can open up the windows. Again, we can ask Mies van der Rohe to come back, and we enter an epoch of abundance. I think that moment is interesting to study as well. Would that lead then to new hedonism? Is that not only what is lacking, or to another kind of lack of things? The construction of lacks is maybe a tool for this, etc. In this spiral of accumulating knowledge, where every moment you go to a max, and you discover, you reveal the next step in that way. And with that, I hope to add to your discussion the sequence, half academic, half practical, on this issue of how to construct the future. Thank you very much for this. Are there any questions, remarks, or shouts, or please, I need them. Are there questions about things that are unclear or hopelessly?
There's a really interesting triangulation work that Bob mentioned already, but urbanism, landscape, and it's obviously not only your formation, but your approach to work on the creating side. But there can be a broken
Okay, so I'm interested in the triangulation among those three things, and two ways in which you're using them. I'm trying to figure out if there's if it's regularized in some way or not. One is that they are circumstantial. In other words, you use them to amplify one another given the circumstances of a given project, or is there some more discriminate way in which you're trying to combine them?
Is there a hierarchy between those in this triangle? Is one more important? Of the subject, is landscape more important?
Maybe certain technical, maybe more complicated features among them, I'm not sure, but I'm wondering how you view the three of them.
I don't know exactly. I made some comparisons once, and in the speech tonight, one, for instance, is between landscape architecture and architecture. What I learned from landscape architecture are a couple of things. One is that it's a profession that has a potential of overview. Architects have not. Landscape architects have three materials: grass, water, pavement. That's it. So they have to do everything with that. And in that smallness of they have to construct that overview. That is fascinating. Architects think the opposite, that they have an abundance of material, and that so therefore we have to discuss endlessly about the complexity that is surrounding with this endless amount of material. In fact, that's not true. Ultimately, architects have only bricks, just stone, glass, and wood, and some deviations from there. So it still is limited what we can do. So we could learn, architects could learn from landscape to look in that perspective. Landscape architects could learn to see their infinity as objects as well. So that's one, say, duality that I can see. So what does urbanism in that respect? Urbanism is normally a profession that's done by planners, not on the most boring zones in the universities. You see gray-looking people that are making GIS maps and making books about parking norms. And so I think the urbanists are crucial. And urbanism is completely not that. It's the opposite. In a society where individualism is there, we have to find new tools for it. So here, the urbanist is maybe the person that can learn from the architects to become much more sexier and to behave and to make objects that represent cities or environments that are hyper attractive. Now that's undertaken only by architects that do foster does it. But yeah, they remain architects. Most of them, I must say, don't have an ability really in that profession. And the second element, which I find incredibly annoying these days, of architects that become urbanists, that way, they become very demagogic. Everyone behave like a politician almost. Maybe I do it as well, but in the speech tonight this may be already a little bit demagogic. But on the other hand, it annoys me that they go for slogans in order to put all the noses, as they say, in the same direction. Because it's about getting things collectively. So, and there's a trap there. Because then the object, the city, becomes maybe very simple or simplistic in a way. Or it becomes almost the opposite of what you want, and then we get a certain kind of richness that could be done. So I think there's a lot to invest in the world of urbanism, that they make the best images, that they make these tools that negotiate between small and big in that way, and that they should be doing it, because the architects are too lazy to do it. Finally, they won't only make some buildings, again another pyramid in Russia or whatever. There are pieces of that circumstantial composition that what one can learn from each other. But we have to make it more specific, and in a way it would be good that the education or the institutes learn from that, or make, for instance, the urbanistic institutes much more sexier. They should go to Obama and to sell the complete country with him, and to draw up the potential for this immense zones of, or if it's about emptiness, if it's about certain thematize it, or give it the kind of direction that would be, and what should that then be? I think it would be gorgeous for a studio to do that. Everyone would love it. Suddenly, more people want to go into urbanism at the moment than into architecture because they get fed up with all the discussions on the toilets and on the say on the house of Michael Jackson, like studios that are everywhere. So that's so maybe that is a possible scenography for that circumstantial zone, if you say. Sarah.
I had a question that actually follows up, though not intentionally, that there's something that I've always wondered about in the analysis, which I think you do a very beautiful job of showing the sort of the analysis of the rule, how that can lead to the exception, that can lead to a new form of rule that offers new possibilities, and I think you've demonstrated that very well. There's something, let's say, ugly about most of the analysis in terms of the way it's presented that has always mystified me, and that's why I thought it was interesting to hear your answer to Ron's question about the triumvirate of your expertise, your background, in that it seems that there's a deliberate attempt to not make the analysis aestheticized. In terms of even the Paris project, which was trying to sell to the president of France, is the blue, the drawings are incredibly washed out, very rudimentary, very crude, and that's an aesthetic that's used throughout for the analysis in the projects. And I have always wanted to hear more about how that is. That instead of sort of selling the project with beautiful images, the images tend to get more gorgeous, as you say, as you develop a project. But what about that beginning and that sort of anti-aesthetic that seems to be part of the office?
A couple of reactions to that, because and I'm aware that so it's partly true that we are living in a culture of selling, and that therefore selling you cannot only do by argumentation, but beauty is a good reason to have that on board to sell, say, the logics even, and that's what aesthetics belong to that world. What your question actually is, and it would be good to make that more comparative. I take that note. So one thing what I discovered in that way in Paris, because what Jean Nouvel did was the opposite, by making only images that look like Blade Runner, and which were, for certain people, were nice, but they were not new. So he made too fast, but the Photoshop world we're in is more copy-paste than copy-paste, what I was talking about. So that's and that's what you can see in most of the films as well, like science fiction makers. They are image-wise mostly not that new yet. So I found Avatar a little breakthrough. And so there's indeed a world to explore, and I think what the White Factory partly do is simply producing more and more images. And half of the education is around that, so that one can counterbalance that. And you were talking so about images. Let me not about how you make a good graph, but how to show the effect of the graph on the reality. No.
No, not necessarily. I actually think it would be interesting to see you make a better graph. I mean, I'm not saying, oh, where's the Photoshop? That would be interesting. I'm curious about, although I do think that the Paris images are deliberately washed out of Photoshop, that's deliberately necessary. But there's an aesthetic that's almost like you're taking the aesthetic of the graph into the leading out of Photoshop. It seems like there's an argument that you're making about the critique of Photoshop, but I'm not sure yet what you're putting in instead.
There are three-dimensionalized graphs at that moment, and they should, and they get an extra, say, criteria that's put in, because they have to become imaginable. That's what I think what architecture or what urbanism or what thinking about urbanism is about, to make it imaginable, because then it becomes close to people, that become more frightening or they become attractive. So that you have to, that's what it needs to to be added to that, to what you say. What should it be that aesthetics? The aesthetics are not only the appearance. What you say needs this kind of criteria to put in. Good. Make a study about that. Next book. Yeah. Any other questions? Is that normal? Bob, do you train them like this? Or? Okay, otherwise, is there a bar? And you can hang out there. That will be great. And it's taking too long. It's fine. Don't worry, I'm not insulted by this.
No answers, but one question, right here.
I can speak loud enough. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship Kara mentioned about your analysis process, and I just would like you to talk a little bit more about that in terms of the relationship between research and vision, and within the sort of production of these endless possibilities and this abundance, how do you actually convince yourself of the final vision?
Well, one thing you didn't understand then in the talk was that there is never a final vision. There are temporary finalities, so, and they have to deal. Sarah explained that the shortest way one can say. You make it to a maximization, and that reveals escapes or weak points or next steps. That's the methodology behind it, not more, not less. So, that's one part of the answer. And what was then? What you want to make more precisely?
I guess maybe more about the agenda that you bring into the research and how the process of your reading of it and your interpretation. And so it's not necessarily a very singular vision locally, but there's a bias coming into the research.
What I discover as well these days that there are an incredible amount of topics or subjects, and that I can only, unfortunately, do only some of them. That because even you can react constantly to certain kind of elements that you would like to love. I mean, I love to work on a kind of new traffic system. So there are so many subjects that's where you could hypothesize upon, in spatial terms. That's what we are here for. We are architects and urbanists, so we do it in spatial manner. And so even green became an interesting subject, although I was completely against it initially. So it was there is not a final thing again in that way. And how do I pick? That's what how do I select? Yeah, that's not always indeed as sequential and consequential as Sarah was suggesting, or that I was suggesting as well. And so there is, for instance, I think I ask always students as well to react very direct and primitively almost on a subject in the first day, or just give me your gut feeling. What is it? And because that opens up. I mean, of course, 30% is a little bit what you already know, but there's more than I thought, more than 50%, which is actually fantastic, say, new viewpoints. And at that moment, so for that subject, to have these different viewpoints, to enlarge them even, to make them comparative, that's then my reaction to it again. So that shows a little bit of how a process, say, goes. It opens up for fantasies in order to explore the unknown, and then systemize them. And that goes back, I think, to what the word intuition is about. Because architects make intuitive designs, but when that has been done, the evaluation leads to why it was successful or not. Why that intuition was, so it gets reason, it gets parameters. I don't know. So that's what I start to stimulate. The second element, which I find very important, is speed in that process. Because at the moment that you have to think and to act, and to react fast, like a tennis player, you have to react on a ball. You have to make an analysis in 1 nanosecond almost. In architecture in a way as well, in urbanism, I have to talk to a client, and I have to, in that meeting, I have to say yes but, or no, or turn it into a direction. There's not more than half an hour for that. And even that split second. And I think that is where analysis comes completely together. So intuition there is, for me, a translation for a kind of hyper knowledge at that moment. So the simulation of that can help the projects, again, to escape or to turn it into an expanding territory. So these are two techniques, which sounds like a therapist. Okay, thanks a lot, and I hope to see you soon, guys.